Kira and Dmitri sat on cold, uneven stone, the dim firelight casting eerie shadows across the walls of the underground cavern. The survivors had done their best to make the place livable, but it felt like stepping back into prehistoric times. Wooden makeshift furniture, piles of felt clothing stitched together from the very suits they fought, and rudimentary fire pits dotted the space. The air was thick with the smell of burning wood, mixed with something else, something acrid that Kira tried not to think too hard about. John, their grizzled leader, approached them with 2 plates. On one side, roasted potatoes that looked half-decent, and on the other, chunks of something grayish-pink, gelatinous, and clearly not of human origin. The sight alone made Kira's stomach turn.
"Here,"
John said gruffly.
"Food's scarce down here. This is what we've survived on for generations."
Dmitri reached out and accepted the plate, looking over at Kira with a silent question in his eyes. She hesitated, but when he nudged her, she took the plate with a polite nod. They each picked up a potato, gnawing on it without much enthusiasm. It was bland but manageable. As for the other offering, the suit flesh, both of them politely declined, pushing it aside.
"We'll stick to the potatoes, thanks,"
Dmitri said through his translator app. John grunted but didn't argue. He took a seat near the fire, the orange flames dancing on his weathered face, and began gnawing on his own plate of food. Around them, other survivors sat quietly in the caverns, some mending felt clothing or weapons, others just sitting, staring into the flames with deadened eyes. Kira leaned forward, her curiosity getting the better of her.
"Where does Barney live? We need to know where he is so we can take him down,"
she asked, her voice soft yet determined. John paused, his eyes narrowing slightly as he chewed. He swallowed slowly, then turned to them with a mixture of wariness and disbelief.
"You're really serious about taking him down?"
he asked. Kira and Dmitri both nodded. John sighed and leaned back against the stone wall.
"Barney's not just some creature you can stroll up to and kill. He's something else. The way we understand it, he came from a place of innocence and joy, but something dark twisted him along the way. His reign started in the city of Fort Atkinson, right here in Wisconsin. That's where he lives."
"In Fort Atkinson?"
Dmitri repeated, trying to remember the geography from the map they'd seen earlier. John nodded.
"Yeah, but don't be fooled by the stories or names. The people who survived for the first few decades started calling it his treehouse, like it was some childhood fantasy gone wrong. But it's not just any building, it's an old PBS Kids studio. That's where Barney was first brought to life."
Kira raised an eyebrow.
"PBS Kids? Like some kind of TV station?"
"Not just any station,"
John said darkly.
"That studio is where the Barney show originated, and it's where everything changed. The studio itself, it floats above the city now, hovering like a giant monolith. No one really knows how, but Barney took it over after he conquered Earth. It's his base of operations, and probably where he gives out orders and controls his army."
Dmitri frowned, glancing at Kira.
"A floating studio? That sounds impossible."
John chuckled bitterly.
"Welcome to Earth. Impossible doesn't mean much anymore. The PBS studio has become a labyrinth, a maze of corridors and rooms that don't seem to serve any real purpose. It's like Barney's twisted sense of humor, I guess. But that's where he lives, and if you really want to take him down, that's where you have to go."
Kira's heart raced at the thought of entering such a place. The idea of facing Barney in his own stronghold seemed like suicide, but if there was even a chance they could stop him, she knew they had to try.
"How do we get there?"
Dmitri asked, his voice steady despite the grim reality sinking in. John gave them a hard look.
"You really want to go through with this, don't you?"
Kira and Dmitri nodded again, more resolute than ever. John sighed and stood up, walking over to a small corner of the cavern where a dusty old map was pinned to the wall. He motioned them over and pointed to a large circle where Fort Atkinson would have been.
"You make your way there. It won't be easy. The entire region is crawling with Barney's forces, suits, congregations, you name it. But if you can make it into the city, I think there's an old road that leads to the base of the studio. No one I know has made it inside, but if you're serious about stopping him, that's where you need to go."
Kira took a deep breath, staring at the crude map. The thought of going into the heart of Barney's domain sent a shiver down her spine, but she knew there was no turning back now. Dmitri stood beside her, his jaw set in determination.
"We'll do it,"
Kira said quietly.
"We'll stop him, somehow."
John didn't look convinced, but he nodded all the same.
I'll tell my people to help you get supplies. We don't have much, but we'll give you what we can. Just know, this could be a one-way trip.
We understand.
Dmitri replied, clenching his fist. As they walked away from the map and back toward their makeshift resting area, Kira and Dmitri exchanged a glance, both knowing the weight of the journey ahead. They sat in silence for a while, letting the enormity of their mission settle in. Barney wasn't just a monster. He was a twisted, malevolent force, and they were about to walk straight into his lair.